Obviously， 我上次在 All England 有问你的球拍球线那一些，但之前我看到你从 Ryuga 1换去 Ryuga 2，现在回去 Ryuga 1，为什么
Why did Li Zijia went from Victor Thruster Ryuga 2 back to his Ryuga 1, especially when he was the poster boy and launch player for the Ryuga 2 anyways? I think I understand why, and it's not all bad. Let me explain. Before I start, thank you to Central Sports for letting me test the Victor Thruster Ryuga 2. Use CKYW as your discount code when shopping with them for an additional discount. So back when I reviewed Victor's Thruster Ryuga 1, I had a good time playing with it and certainly enjoyed it very much as a singles-based racket. It certainly had good power, good head weight, crisp hitting feeling and incredible net shots. Full review here. Obviously characteristics like these don't come without a price, both financially and physically, as it's certainly not a racket which everyone will be able to fully enjoy, unless you're strong and built like Zijia, of course. On top of these, I do like the design of the Ryuga 1 too, the very nice lilac mixed in around the super bright neon orange, love it. So obviously when Victor announced the Ryuga 2 and marketed it really heavily with Zijia, I was interested to see what Victor would do in terms of upgrades, as the Ryuga 1 was already very lovely. And so as soon as the Ryuga 2 was released, Zijia went back to playing with the Ryuga 1, and as far as I'm aware, Chico or Wardoyo is the only top player to be playing with the Ryuga 2 currently. So why is this? And after spending lots of time with the Ryuga 2, I understand why. Let's start with the visuals. Victor mentioned the Ryuga 2 continued with the dragon theme with the eyes and whiskers visible on the T-joint of the racket. You can also certainly feel the dark energy that's coming from the Ryuga 2 in black. I don't know if you've watched Shaolin Soccer before, but if you haven't, you should. The Ryuga 2's T-joint certainly showed some of that dark energy that the baddies were showing in that final Shaolin Soccer match. A classic, of course. There was also some of the dragon scales decals showing on some of the sections of the frame, as well as some of the shaft. The shiny decals, I like. Overall, it's not my cup of tea in looks, but I'm sure some of you will love it. Many of you will also notice that the Ryuga 2 this time around has Victor's free core handle technology, which is instead of the traditional wooden handle, the free core is an injection molded plastic handle, which according to the comments that I've read from my videos thus far, has been quite divisive. I personally like the free core handle, as I think it does make the racket handle better and it's easier to play with, but many of you have quoted durability issues with it, so let me know down in the comment section below about your experiences with the free core handles. Victor's certainly launching more rackets with them. In terms of specs, both Ryugas are in 3UG5 and the Ryuga 2 is almost identical to the Ryuga 1 on paper, like the power box frame shape, pyrofill and hardcore tech. There's an upgrade to the WES, the whipping effect system, from 1.0 to 2.0, which Victor says allows the rackets to flex faster, so I guess that's all good for us. In terms of measurements, the Ryuga 2 had a frame height of 23.8 centimeters and an 18.5 centimeters in width, which is very similar to the Ryuga 1. In terms of frame thickness and amount of recess on the frame, the Ryuga 2 was identical to the Ryuga 1 and both came out with a thickness of 10.1mm, as well as having the top half of their frame recess. Talking about the racket frames, if you want to protect your precious badminton racket frames from chips and damage, check out the premium racket protection tape I have on ckYW.com/shop for that invisible and peace of mind protection. In terms of the racket shaft, the Ryuga 2 has a slimmer but slightly shorter shaft at 6.9mm and 21.5cm in length, in comparison to the Ryuga 1, which came in at 7.1mm in diameter and 22cm in length. In terms of handle, the free core handle in Ryuga 2 was 1.5cm longer, measuring in at 17.5cm, in comparison to Ryuga 1's handle, which was only 16cm. For note, the Ryuga 1's handle was the shortest racket handle I've ever measured, and there was only one other racket that I've come across at 16cm, and that was the second generation of Yonax's Astrox 88S racket. However, there's an interesting measurement here, and the Ryuga 2 is longer than the Ryuga 1. At 680mm in length, it is 5mm longer than the Ryuga 1 to be exact. Current generations of rackets are generally 675mm in length, and generally, when a manufacturer wants to increase the speed of their rackets, they might shorten the length of their rackets, often by 5mm. For example, Yonax's Astrox 88S Pro racket is a speed machine in the world of head-heavy rackets, but it's a full centimeter shorter at only 670mm compared to the Ryuga 2. Don't worry though, 680mm is still within BWF's legal limit, and the added length makes sense as soon as you start playing with it. Stringing wise, both rackets are rated to 32 pounds in tension, and the Ryuga 2 was in line with other top-end rackets that I've strung, as I've went with my usual string setup of Yonex Aerobite at 27 by 29 pounds for testing. It was pretty solid with only a little flex around the very top of the frame, so pretty normal there. As soon as you start hitting a few shoals, you'll immediately find really nice easy power and a very nice contact feel from the Ryuga 2. In comparison to the Ryuga 1, this thing to me is smoother, faster and very enjoyable. It somehow feels that this Ryuga 2 is just that little bit tad lighter, although they are also both 3U. Additionally, I also felt that the Ryuga 2 feels softer than the original Ryuga 1. The slightly softer feeling is probably coming from the combination of the free core, perhaps the WES 2.0, as well as the ever so slightly longer length. Although I probably think it's the 90% from the free core handle allowing the shaft to flex better. To be honest, I never realized the added length when I was testing the Ryuga 2. I guess longer cantilevers equals easier leverage. It was only when I sat down to measure the racket that I realized it's longer than the Ryuga 1. So what's the upside of this slightly softer feeling then? The result is a more pliable, more forgiving and easier to play power racket. I guess Victor realized not many of us have the physicality, skill, technique and timing of someone like Zijia, so they've tuned the racket to suit us, the amateurs, a lot more. You all know that I value the playability of a racket very highly, often preferring rackets which are easy to play over incredible but outright demanding rackets. Because of how badminton has evolved over the last 10 years, equipment manufacturers are now making rackets and strings, which in a sense makes it easier for us to play the shots with light, thus giving us more control and options during the rallies. This step from Ryuga 1 to the Ryuga 2 certainly reminded me of when Yonex went from the second generation of Astrox 88S and 88D to the current generation of the Astrox 88S Pros and 88D Pros. They just made the rackets easier to play with and it greatly benefited us amateurs. And Victor has certainly done the same here with the Ryuga 2. Even in my notes during testing, I noted at the time that it kind of felt similar to the 88D Pro, which is a really enjoyable head-heavy racket to play with. But obviously, if you prefer the original rock-solid, crispy feeling of the original Ryuga 1, then I think you'd be a little bit disappointed with this, as this feels more spongy than the original. Don't get me wrong, this Ryuga 2 isn't soft by any means, but it's softer compared to the Ryuga 1. This is also why you should not compare specs blindly on paper, as both the first and second generations of Ryugas show the same stiffness gauge, but they feel very different altogether. I guess this also explains why Zijia went back to his Ryuga 1, as I think he really prefers a stiffer, crisper feeling from his rackets for more direct control of the shuttle. Perhaps Ryuga 2's increased pliability introduced a little bit of flex and instability for him and his needs. It's always down to personal preference, of course. Overall, this Ryuga 2 was certainly developed for us, the general public, as a very easygoing, head-heavy power racket. If you're currently playing with the Thruster F Enhanced and wanted or needed more power, this one's certainly for you. If you want a crispy feeling from a head-heavy power racket, go back to Ryuga 1. In the meantime, I will see you in the next one.